Ethan Wells had never liked the silence of space. Back on Earth, even in the quietest places, there were always sounds. Birds, wind, cars in the distance. But on Station Uranus, orbiting just past Jupiter's moon Europa, everything felt still. Almost too still. The silence wasn't just outside the walls of the station. It lived inside the rooms, especially the one he now shared with his new roommate. His name was Al. At least, that's what he wrote on the introduction form. Al didn't say much. When he did, his voice was calm, almost too calm. He moved slowly, carefully, never in a rush. He was tall, thin, and always wore a black hoodie with gloves, even when it was hot inside the room. Ethan had never seen his arms or hands, or even his neck, just the edge of his jaw, too smooth to be human. They had been roommates for about 3 weeks. Ethan had been assigned to the Interspecies Science Exchange as part of a human volunteer program. Students and researchers from other planets came to Station Uranus to study, live, and learn with humans. The program was supposed to promote peace. But nothing about Al felt peaceful. He didn't eat with others in the mess hall. He didn't socialize. His eyes, when Ethan saw them, seemed to reflect light like glass. They were silver and cold. Still, Ethan tried to be polite. "Hey, I'm making coffee," he said one morning. "Want any?" Al didn't even look at him. "No," he replied quietly. "It's poison to me." Ethan chuckled, thinking it was a joke. But Al wasn't joking. That night, something strange happened. Ethan woke up around 3 a.m. The room was dark, but not completely. His computer screen was glowing faintly. It was on, even though he clearly remembered shutting it down. He sat up and rubbed his eyes. The screen showed lines of code scrolling, too fast for him to read. Some of it looked like ancient writing, some like math. He didn't recognize any of it. "Did you turn this on?" he asked sleepily. Silence. Ethan turned his head. Al was standing in the middle of the room, not lying in bed, not moving, just standing, facing Ethan. The glow from the screen lit up part of his face. His eyes were wide open. He wasn't blinking. Ethan felt a chill crawl up his back. "Al," he asked again, this time with a shaky voice. "Are you okay?" Still no answer. Then Al tilted his head slightly. His mouth moved, but the sound that came out wasn't English. It was low and soft, like whispering wind through broken glass. Ethan reached for the light switch beside his bed. Click. The light came on, but flickered, then died, all at once. What the? Suddenly, the computer screen shut off. Total darkness returned. And then Al moved. Slowly, smoothly. He turned around and walked back to his bed like nothing had happened. Lay down. Pulled the blanket up. Ethan sat frozen for a full minute. He wasn't sure if he had imagined it. The next morning, Ethan asked, "Were you up last night?" "Around 3. Al looked at him blankly. "No. You didn't use my computer." "No. Because I think it turned on by itself." Al blinked. "Machines are strange here. Weak. Old." That was all he said. Ethan didn't push further, but something had changed. He no longer felt safe. That day, he skipped his research shift and stayed in the station's central library, reading about alien physiology and technology. Most of it was restricted, but some sections were open to humans. One thing caught his attention, a document titled Eyes That Reflect Light. It mentioned species from the distant Gillian system, whose eyes had metallic irises that shimmered in the dark. One of them, called the Velnari, were said to be watchers, silent observers. They recorded everything, studied everything, and they rarely spoke. Ethan whispered the word to himself. Velnari. Could Al be one of them? Back in the room that night, Ethan pretended to sleep. He lay still, eyes barely open, breathing slowly. It was quiet. Too quiet. Then he heard it, soft movement, a chair creaking, the floor shifting. Elle stood again and walked over to Ethan's bed. Ethan didn't move. He could feel the presence now, right beside him. Closer, closer still. And then, a sound, a tiny click, like a button being pressed. Then a whisper, low, soft, in that same strange language. Ethan's breath caught. Suddenly, the air got colder. A soft breeze passed over his skin. He opened his eyes, just slightly, and saw Elle holding a small silver device over him. It was glowing blue, and scanning his face. Ethan shot up. "What the hell are you doing?" Elle didn't flinch. He stepped back, hiding the device inside his hoodie. Ethan's heart was pounding. "You were scanning me." "That thing. What is it?" Elle stared at him. His voice was calm. "I was only checking." "Checking what?" "If it was time to tell you," Elle replied. Ethan stared. "Tell me what?" Elle turned toward his bed and said one final sentence before pulling the blanket over himself. "They know you're here." And then he said nothing more. Ethan didn't sleep that night. Ethan couldn't forget the words Elle had said. "They know you're here." He kept repeating them in his head like a broken alarm. He didn't know who they were or what Elle meant, but the weight of that sentence pressed down on him like a hand wrapped around his chest. Every sound in the station now felt sharper. Every flicker of light looked like a warning. Even his own breath seemed too loud in the quiet room they shared. Elle, however, behaved as if nothing had happened. He got up the next morning, brushed his teeth, packed his strange backpack with smooth metallic tools, and left without a word. No mention of the night before. No apology. No explanation. Ethan didn't follow him. He waited until he was sure Elle was gone. Then he locked the door and began searching. He checked under Elle's bed. Nothing. He opened the closet, mostly empty, except for a strange black coat with small blinking lights in its inner lining. It looked alive, like it was breathing. Ethan quickly closed the door. Then he moved to Elle's desk. Elle didn't keep a datapad like normal students. Instead, there were odd circular stones, thin silver strips like wires that hummed when touched, and one small cube that floated half an inch above the desk. Ethan reached toward it. The moment his finger grazed the edge, the cube flashed and emitted a soft pulse, like a heartbeat. Then symbols appeared in the air. Not letters, not numbers. Shapes, spirals, moving stars. Ethan stared, entranced. The symbols spun slowly, forming patterns his brain couldn't fully understand, but part of him felt like they were watching him, not the other way around. A deep voice echoed from the cube. Language not authorized. Genetic signature mismatch. Ethan jumped back. The cube dimmed and fell to the desk with a soft click. His hands were shaking. Suddenly, the station lights flickered, not just in their room, but everywhere. Even the emergency strip on the floor blinked twice. Then came the voice. Calm, robotic, but strange. Security alert. Unauthorized dock access detected. All personnel remain in designated zones. Level 3 containment active. Ethan rushed to the small window by the corridor. From there, he could see part of the docking bay. A new ship had arrived, but not a registered shuttle. This one was long, dark, and completely silent. No station flags, no identification. It looked like it was made from black glass and steel. Sharp edges, smooth like a shadow. Then he saw something worse. A figure stepped out of the ship, twice the size of a normal human. It walked without sound. Its armor was dark red, with marks that pulsed like blood beneath the surface. Its helmet had no eyes, just a smooth plate that curved downward like a blade. It moved slowly but with purpose. Security bots rolled toward it, blocking the path. The figure didn't stop. It simply raised a hand. And the bots shut down, mid-movement. They froze, dropped, lifeless. Ethan gasped. His stomach turned. He turned around and grabbed the emergency beacon hidden in their room. Before he could press it, the door opened. Al stood there. His hoodie was gone. So were the gloves. Ethan froze. Al's skin shimmered like moonlight. Not pale, glowing. His arms were lined with faint silver veins, and his fingers ended in soft tips that looked more like light than flesh. "We need to leave," Al said. "What's going on?" Ethan demanded, stepping back. "He's here." "Who is he?" Al glanced at the window. "The one who hunts me. The one who hunts anyone who knows me. You're not safe anymore." Ethan stared. "You didn't warn me. You didn't even tell me the truth." "There was no time." "There was time last night, when you were standing over me, scanning me, watching me sleep." Al paused. For a moment, his glowing eyes dimmed. "I was trying to see if you could survive what's coming." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The hallway outside echoed with metal footsteps, getting closer. Al pulled a small orb from his side pocket and threw it against the floor. It shattered with no sound, but the room instantly changed. The walls rippled. The air buzzed. "What did you do?" Ethan whispered. "I hid us," Al replied. For now. They stood together, invisible behind some kind of shield, as the door opened again, without being touched. The armored figure entered the room. It looked around slowly. Ethan wanted to scream. The presence of the creature felt wrong, heavy, like gravity itself had bent around it. He couldn't see a face, but he felt the weight of its attention. The figure walked to the desk. It reached out and touched the floating cube. The cube lit up, but stayed silent. No symbols, no voice. The hunter made a low sound, displeased. Then it turned and began scanning the room. The deep hum grew louder. Its arm opened into a panel, revealing a glowing red sensor. It swept the room, inch by inch. Ethan's heartbeat thudded in his ears. The sensor moved closer. Then, right before it reached their hiding field, it stopped. The figure froze and turned its head slightly. Then it spoke for the first time. The voice wasn't deep. It was cold, smooth, emotionless. "I know you're here." Al didn't move. Neither did Ethan. The figure waited a few seconds longer, then lowered its arm. Without another word, it walked back out of the room. The door closed. The shield dropped. Ethan collapsed to his knees. Al knelt beside him. "We have maybe 20 minutes." Ethan looked up. To do what? To run. Al pulled out a device and pressed it. A soft humming filled the air. "I can take us through the maintenance tunnels. There's a hidden exit port on the lower level." Ethan didn't know what to say. He felt like a mouse running from a hawk, one that could see through walls. "What does he want?" Ethan asked quietly. "Why is he after you?" Al stared at the door. "Because I left, and because I'm not supposed to tell anyone what I know. And now I know." Al's silver eyes turned toward him. "That's why we're both going to die. Unless we disappear." They didn't wait any longer. The emergency lights on Station Uranus blinked red, casting everything in flashes of warning. A calm voice echoed through the station speakers, repeating the same cold sentence every 10 seconds. "Security protocol engage. Restricted access in progress. Please remain in your assigned zones." But Ethan wasn't in his zone. He was crouching behind a stack of storage crates in a dark hallway, breathing fast, trying not to panic. Al crouched beside him, pressing buttons on a device that looked like a metal seashell with glowing ridges. His long, silver fingers moved quickly, each touch sending sparks of light across the surface. Ethan whispered, "Where are we going?" Al didn't look at him. "Maintenance Shaft 7 leads to the outer ring. From there, we can reach the emergency escape tubes. And then we leave the station." Ethan shook his head. "We can't just leave. I live here. My friends are here." "They'll be fine," Al said. "He's not after them." The hallway lights suddenly flickered off, total blackness for a second, then came back on, dimmer than before. Ethan looked behind him. Nothing. But he could feel it. That thing. The hunter. It was nearby. Somewhere behind the walls, or maybe even above them. The air had changed. He felt it in his skin. He had never felt hunted before. But now, every sound, every gust of air through the vents, felt like a warning. They moved again, following Ale through a narrow door labeled Authorized Corrido. Behind it was a thin ladder that led down into the maintenance shafts. Dark, metal tunnels that wrapped through the station like intestines. No lights, no windows, just cables, pipes, and the soft hum of machines. Ale didn't need a light. His eyes glowed faintly, guiding the way. Ethan followed, careful not to make noise. His legs trembled as he climbed down. The shaft twisted, then opened into a wider tunnel with barely enough room to stand. Gravity was weak here. They had to use handrails to move forward, floating slightly between each step. Ethan finally asked the question that had been burning inside him since the moment the hunter arrived. "Who are you really?" El paused, his glowing hand resting on a wall panel. "I told you," he said. "I'm a runaway." "Runaway from what?" El turned to face him. In the dim tunnel, his features were more alien than ever, smooth, too perfect, glowing gently like starlight trapped in skin. "From my own kind," he said. "From my family. My world." "Why?" Ale looked away. "Because I didn't want to be what they made me to be." He touched the wall, and a hidden door opened silently. Inside was a control panel and a small chamber glowing with soft blue light. "They raised me to be a weapon," El continued. "My people are not explorers. They are rulers. They believe in control, in silence, in fear. I was next in line to join their enforcers. I saw what they did to planets that disobeyed, to people who asked too many questions. So you escaped." "I escaped during a training mission. I stole a ship and came here. The program didn't question it. They accepted me. And now they've found you." "Yes." Ethan stepped into the chamber beside him. The door closed behind them with a soft hiss. "What about the bounty hunter? Is he your brother or something?" "No. He's worse. He's what I was supposed to become." Ethan's chest tightened. "So, what happens if he catches you?" Ale didn't answer right away. Then he said, quietly, "He won't just take me. He'll erase me. Everything I learned. Everyone I spoke to. He'll clean the record." Ethan understood. Not just kill, but erase. Like Ale had never existed. The chamber moved, sliding them sideways through the station. It was a shortcut tube, used by engineers and medical droids. Silent and fast. As they moved, Ethan remembered the moment he first met Al. How awkward he was. How cold and distant. Now it made sense. He had been hiding every second, watching everyone, preparing for the day they came for him. The chamber stopped with a click. They stepped into a small circular room filled with storage crates and a hatch leading to the outer ring. The ring circled the entire station and was used for spacewalk repairs. But the hatch wouldn't open. Al pressed his device to it. Lights blinked red. "Locked," he said. "Can you override it?" "Trying." Suddenly, the walls shook. A deep, booming sound echoed through the metal. Ethan looked up. Dust fell from the ceiling. "What was that?" "He found us," Al said. "He's forcing the station to flush us out." "What does that mean?" "He's breaching rooms, one by one, closing off all other exits." Ethan grabbed the edge of the hatch. "We have to go now." El closed his eyes. His hands moved faster, the device flashing blue, red, white. Then the hatch clicked. It opened an inch. They pushed it wide. A gust of cold air hit them. Dry, recycled, but sharp. The outer ring was dark. Only red emergency lights lit the path in thin lines. El moved quickly now, his body almost floating in the low gravity. Ethan followed, every muscle tense. Behind them, the sound of boots echoed through the tunnel. Slow, heavy, metallic. He was close. They ran faster, turning corners, crawling through gaps between storage tanks. Ethan's breath became shallow. His heart pounded like a drum inside his ears. Then, they saw it. A small panel at the end of the corridor. Emergency escape pod, half buried behind crates. Dust-covered. Old. Al began pressing buttons on the wall beside it. I can get it ready in 20 seconds. They were down to seconds now. The footsteps stopped. Ethan turned his head. From the far end of the tunnel, the hunter stood, unmoving. Then, it raised its hand. A red beam shot forward. Al shoved Ethan behind a crate. The beam hit the wall, slicing it like butter. Sparks flew. Smoke filled the air. Ethan coughed, struggling to breathe. Al was hit. Not directly, but close. His shoulder was burned. His skin cracked like shattered glass, glowing white underneath. But he kept working. He didn't scream, didn't stop. Then, ding, the pod door opened. Al grabbed Ethan and threw him inside. Wait, what about you? I'll follow. No, you're hurt. Al placed his glowing hand on Ethan's chest. You're the only reason I even made it this far. The hunter stepped closer. Al turned. For a brief moment, the two faced each other. Then Al pulled a small disc from his chest, pressed it against the pod's controls, and the door slammed shut. Ethan banged against the window. No. Al looked in through the glass and smiled. Then the pod launched. The stars outside blurred as the pod shot away from the station. Ethan watched as Station Oranos shrank behind him, red lights blinking. Then, a bright flash. Something exploded. Ethan shouted, AEL. But there was no answer. He was alone. And somewhere behind him, maybe L was gone. Or maybe he was just beginning to fight back. The emergency pod drifted silently through space. Inside, Ethan sat with his knees pulled up to his chest, eyes locked on the round window as the stars slowly moved past. The cold, soft blue lights inside the pod flickered from time to time, barely keeping him company. He hadn't spoken in over an hour. There was no one to talk to anyway. He still didn't know if L was alive. His last memory of him, L smiling through the pod's window, just before slamming the launch button, played over and over in his head. That smile wasn't fake. It wasn't empty. It was a goodbye, a real one. But Ethan refused to believe it. He rubbed his face, trying to stay calm, even though every part of him felt like falling apart. The pod's AI finally broke the silence. Survivor detected. Bioscan complete. Human. Ethan Wells. Oxygen stable. Course. Uncontrolled. Nearest station. Unknown. Ethan leaned back. Figures, he muttered. Of course it's unknown. Then he noticed something on the side panel. A red light blinking slowly beneath the emergency transponder. He leaned forward and tapped it. The screen lit up with one word. MSAG storied. He pressed play. The screen shimmered, and Al's face appeared, not glowing, not masked, just him, bare and calm. For the first time, Ethan saw what Al really looked like without shadows. His skin wasn't white. It was silvery, like moonlight hardened into flesh. His eyes were gentle, not cold. And his voice wasn't robotic. It was soft, almost human. If you're seeing this, Al began, then I didn't make it onto the pod. Or maybe I did, but something happened. I recorded this because I owed you the truth. Ethan leaned in, heart pounding. I wasn't sent here by accident. I chose Earth because it's the only planet my people fear, not because of weapons, not because of strength, but because of something we don't understand. Free will. Al looked down for a second, then back into the camera. My race, the Velnari. We control, we command, we collect. But humans, you question, you dream, you make choices even when logic says you shouldn't. And that scares them. Ethan blinked. He wasn't sure if he should be proud or terrified. I came here to learn, Elle continued. But I stayed because of you. Because you made me believe something new was possible. You treated me like I mattered, even when you didn't know what I was. You offered me coffee. You smiled at me. You talked to me. Elle paused again. I was sent to Earth once before, he admitted. When I was young, I was supposed to mark the planet's key systems, power, water, satellites, for later control. I didn't do it. I couldn't. Something about humans stopped me. I wiped the data and lied to my commanders. Ethan stared in disbelief. You were a scout, he whispered. The screen flickered for a moment but came back. Now they've sent others, Elle said. Stronger than me. Smarter. I left to delay them, but I know it won't last. They'll find Earth again. And when they do, they'll come not with questions, but with chains. He leaned closer to the camera. But you can stop them. Not with guns. Not with war. With truth. Ale raised something in his hand. A small glowing orb. This orb holds a full map of the invasion path. Names, ships, weak points. I hid it inside the pod's memory system. It only responds to your DNA. It's yours now. Ethan's mouth fell open. I know this is a lot, Ale said. But you're the first human I trusted. That has to mean something. Then Ale looked away, and his voice dropped into something almost like a whisper. If I make it out, I'll find you. The screen turned black. Ethan sat still, not moving, not breathing. Then he stood up quickly and opened the side panel on the pod's console. Inside, wrapped in soft cloth, was the orb, glowing softly, just like in the message. He touched it. The orb pulsed once. Then symbols appeared in the air. Arrows, coordinates, names, all floating around him like stars in a map. It was real. Ale had given him the key to stop something much bigger than both of them. Suddenly, the pod jolted. Ethan stumbled back, slamming into the wall. Lights turned red. Warning, the AI said. Approaching unknown vessel. Automatic docking engage. Ethan looked through the window. A massive ship hovered ahead, bigger than any he'd seen. Black and silent. No markings. But then, a message appeared on the pod's screen. Human life form detected. Alliance rescue craft inbound. Standby. Rescue. The pod docked with a soft hiss. The door opened slowly. Ethan stepped out, clutching the orb, not sure if he was walking into safety or another trap. The hallway was dark, but lined with soft blue lights. A voice greeted him. Welcome aboard. You must be Ethan Wells. It wasn't Elle's voice, but it was human. A man in a dark uniform approached. He had a badge shaped like a planet with rings. Who are you? Ethan asked, stepping back. Captain Ray, Human Defense Alliance. You've just become the most important person in the galaxy. Ethan held the orb tighter. I didn't ask to be. The captain smiled. No one ever does. Behind him, doors opened. Soldiers walked in. Scientists, robots scanning him. Ethan didn't move. He looked up at the stars outside the window. Somewhere out there, Elle might still be alive. And if he wasn't, then Ethan would make sure none of it was for nothing. He had a mission now, and it was only just beginning. The ship felt too clean. Ethan sat alone in a cold room with silver walls and no windows. The table in front of him reflected his face like a mirror. Pale skin, tired eyes, and lips pressed tight. The glowing orb Elle had hidden in the escape pod sat in the center of the table, pulsing gently like it had a heartbeat of its own. 2 guards stood outside the door, both human, but they didn't speak to him. They barely blinked. Ethan didn't feel rescued. He felt trapped. It had been 3 hours since Captain Ray brought him aboard. They said they needed to verify the orb's data. They said it was for his safety, but he could feel the change in how they looked at him, like he wasn't a guest anymore, like he was something dangerous. Finally, the door opened. Captain Ray entered. He looked tired too, but not from fear, from knowledge. He sat down across from Ethan and placed his hands flat on the table. "We checked the orb," he said. Ethan leaned forward. "And the data inside is real, disturbingly real." The captain sighed. "It lists over 30 invasion paths. 4 are already in progress. 2 target colonies on Mars and Titan. 1 leads directly to Earth." Ethan's mouth went dry. So Al wasn't lying. "No," Ray said. "He was telling the truth. Maybe more than we were ready to hear." Ethan glanced at the orb. "What happens now?" Captain Ray paused. Then he looked Ethan in the eye. "You're under containment." "What?" "You were roommates with an alien fugitive for months. He accessed our systems, moved through our stations, hid vital intel with you. That makes you, at best, an asset, at worst, a threat." Ethan stood up. "That's insane. I didn't ask for any of this. We know, and that's what makes it harder." Ray pressed a button, and the room's doors sealed shut behind him. "We've received a signal," he continued. "Encrypted. Not ours. It's coming from deep space, and it's addressed to you." Ethan frowned. "Me?" Ray nodded. "Whoever sent it used your full genetic ID to unlock the message. The signal came through the edge of our listening zone, just outside Saturn's orbit." Ethan's heart pounded. "Is it Al?" "We don't know. The message is short. Just 3 words." Ray tapped his datapad. A robotic voice played across the room. Faint, distorted, but clear. "I found you." Ethan sat down slowly. The room felt colder now. Ray looked uneasy. "We don't know if that's a threat or a warning." "It's not a threat," Ethan said quietly. "It's him. Assuming he's alive," the captain added. "He's alive," Ethan replied. "I can feel it." Ray stood up. "Maybe. But even if he is, that doesn't mean we're safe. The data he gave you makes you a target. For the Velnari, for their hunters, for anyone who doesn't want this truth spreading." Ethan looked up. "So what?" "You're going to lock me in here forever." Ray didn't answer. Instead, he said, "We're preparing a secure transport back to Earth. You'll be moved under high surveillance. If anything happens, we'll respond. But until then, you're not going anywhere alone." The door opened again. Guards stepped in. Ethan didn't resist as they led him through the ship's long corridors. Every crew member stared as he passed, some with curiosity, some with fear. It felt like walking through a dream that kept turning darker. They brought him to another chamber, this one more like a cell. No bed, no window, just a chair and a screen. The screen lit up on its own. Ethan expected to see Ray again, but instead, a new face appeared. Not human, not Ale. The alien had deep green skin, eyes like polished stones, and a voice that echoed like a whisper inside a cave. "You hold what was not meant for your kind," the alien said. "Return the orb, and you will be left in peace." Ethan stared. "Who are you?" "An observer, one who has watched your world longer than you know." "Are you Velnari?" The alien blinked slowly. "No, but I serve those who are." Ethan's fists tightened. "Then tell them to come themselves." "You misunderstand," the voice replied. "We are already here." The screen went black. Ethan stepped back, heart racing. Outside, the hallway lights turned red. An alarm sounded. He rushed to the door, but it was sealed. Then the ship rocked violently. A voice echoed through the intercom. Ray's voice. "Code black. Unauthorized ship has entered orbit. Shields up. All crew to battle stations." Another tremor. Then silence. The screen lit up again. This time, it was Al. Bloody, weak, breathing hard, but alive. "Ethan," he said, "listen to me. They're not after the orb anymore. They're after you. You've bonded with it. That wasn't supposed to happen." Ethan blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means you're the only one who can use it now. They can't take it, but they can take you." The screen cracked with static. "Help is coming," Al said, "but you need to hold on. Don't let them near the orb, not even the humans. Some of them have already been compromised." Then the signal cut off completely. Ethan stood alone again. But now, everything had changed. He wasn't just the message carrier. He was the message itself, and he had no idea who to trust anymore. The ship had gone completely quiet. No alarms, no voices, no movement. Ethan stood in the middle of his sealed room, staring at the door as if it might explode open at any second. His heart thudded with every second of silence. Minutes passed, then an hour. The lights dimmed, as though the ship were breathing slower, almost asleep. He sat on the floor, holding the orb in his hands. Its soft blue glow pulsed against his palms like it was alive, like it trusted him, like it was waiting for him to do something important. But he didn't know what. He wanted to believe Al was right, that help was coming, that he could hold on. But now, he wasn't sure what help looked like anymore. A sharp knock broke the stillness. The door hissed open. A single woman stepped in. She wore a long black coat with silver trim, and her eyes scanned Ethan like a machine. Cold, precise, no warmth in her face. She didn't introduce herself. Instead, she said, "The message from Earth came in." Ethan stood up slowly. "You mean someone actually responded?" She nodded once. "Our highest defense council. They've seen the orb's contents. They analyzed the invasion paths, your DNA lock, and the signal you triggered when the orb activated." Ethan's fingers tightened around the orb. "And what did they say?" The woman took a breath. It was the first human thing she'd done so far. "They said," she paused, "you are not to return." Ethan stared at her. "What?" "Your presence now threatens Earth's safety. The orb has marked you. Anyone tracking it will come straight for wherever you are. The Council believes keeping you away from Earth is the only way to protect the planet." Ethan blinked. "So they're, what? Abandoning me. They're preserving billions." He shook his head. No, they're scared. That's not the same." She didn't respond. Ethan felt like the floor had fallen away. Just hours ago, he was a student sharing a room with a quiet alien. Now, he was in exile, with information no one wanted to touch, and enemies no one knew how to stop. He backed up and pointed at the orb. This could stop the invasion. It could save lives. The woman's expression didn't change. It could also accelerate it. If they believe Earth is preparing a defense, they might strike early. The Council doesn't want that risk. Ethan shook his head again, eyes burning. "So I'm just some virus now. Too dangerous to come home." "You've become a focal point in something far greater than yourself," she said calmly. "Emotion cannot decide the future of Earth." Ethan laughed, empty and bitter. "You sound just like them. The ones who sent Al to kill and conquer." The woman turned away, preparing to leave. "We'll be changing course. You'll be taken to Outpost 19 in deep space. Isolated. Secure. Safe." "Safe for who?" he whispered. She didn't answer. The door slid shut behind her, sealing him in again. For a long time, Ethan didn't move. The orb's glow reflected in his wet eyes. He had been trying to do the right thing, share the truth, warn others. But now, the truth had made him untouchable. Then, the room pulsed. Not the walls, not the lights. The air itself, a soft vibration, like a heartbeat in the floor. Ethan stood up slowly. The orb was floating now, on its own, rising gently into the air in front of him. Its glow changed from blue to white, then to gold. Suddenly, images surrounded him, not on screens, in the air. Stars, maps, ships, symbols, faces, both human and alien. Voices whispering in strange languages, his own face, L's, and one planet glowing red, Earth. L's voice echoed around him, but it wasn't from a recording. It was from the orb itself. You are its carrier now, the voice said. The knowledge lives with you. Ethan whispered, Why me? Because you saw me as more than what I was, L's voice said. You asked questions. You made me doubt what I had been taught. Now, it's your turn. The room brightened. Then, just as suddenly, it all stopped. The orb dropped gently into his hands. Silence returned, but something had changed. He wasn't afraid anymore. He walked to the door and knocked once. When it opened, the sane woman waited on the other side. I'm not going to Outpost 19, Ethan said. You don't have a choice. I do now, he said, and so do you. He raised the orb. It flashed once, and the ship's lights flickered. The woman blinked. For the first time, she looked uncertain. What did you do? Ethan stepped forward. The orb connected with the ship. It has full access now. If you try to lock me up again, this ship won't fly another inch. She stepped back. Ethan walked past her. Crew members stared as he passed again. But this time, they weren't staring at a prisoner. They were staring at something else. Something new. A voice came through the intercom. Captain Ray to command deck. Urgent. The orb has just linked with the main navigation system. Orders, sir. Ethan reached the bridge before the captain arrived. He sat in the pilot's seat. No one stopped him, because no one could. The orb hovered beside him, spinning slowly, and Ethan knew what he had to do. He wasn't going to hide. He was going to Earth, even if they didn't want him, even if they were afraid, because someone had to stand between what was coming and the world he still called home. The stars passed like streaks of silver as the ship broke into high-speed transit, racing through the final leg of its journey toward Earth. Inside the control chamber, Ethan sat quietly, his hands resting beside the orb, which now hovered above the navigation panel like a silent co-pilot. Its glow had settled into a steady gold, warm and steady, no longer pulsing with fear, no longer hiding. He had made his decision. Even after everything, the threats, the exile, the warnings, he was going home. The bridge was empty, though not because it had to be. The crew had simply stopped trying to stop him. Once the orb had linked to the ship's core systems, Ethan had become more than a passenger. He was now the path and the key. Still, he wasn't sure if Earth would welcome him. He knew the Council's order. Do not return. But how could he listen, knowing what was coming? He could already see it ahead. Earth, a glowing blue pearl wrapped in clouds, spinning slowly in the dark. It looked peaceful, untouched, still free. But that was the illusion. The Velnari fleet was already in motion. The orb had shown him everything. A countdown had begun. Somewhere out there, massive vessels shaped like floating daggers were cloaked in deep space, waiting for the signal to strike. Their orders were clear: silence Earth before it had a chance to rise. And Ethan, once just a student, just a roommate, was now the last interruption in their perfect plan. A quiet beeping pulled him from thought. Unidentified ship, state your purpose. The voice was from Earth's orbital command. This is Ethan Wells, he replied. Authorization code Alpha 7 Cronus. Silence followed. Then, stand by for confirmation. He waited. Ethan Wells, you are not cleared for re-entry. Per Council orders, you are to remain in orbit until further instruction. Turn your vessel away immediately. He leaned closer to the mic. I can't do that. Ethan, I have information that could stop what's coming. I have their map, their plans, They're blind spots. You exile me now, and you'll have no warning. You think you're playing it safe, but you're just turning your back before the storm hits. Orders are clear. No, he said. They're outdated. There was no reply. The ship continued toward Earth. The orb vibrated gently, reacting to the planet's pull. Then another voice cut through the channel. Familiar. AL to Earth Command. Override Council Order. Ethan froze. The voice was real. It was him. I repeat, Al continued, override the Council. The boy is carrying more than data. He carries the last chance for survival. Ethan rushed to the comms. Al, you're alive. A low chuckle came through. Barely. But yes. They couldn't stop me. How did you find me? I never stopped watching. Ethan smiled, the first real smile in days. You're still creepy. And you're still reckless. A pause. I'm almost in orbit, Al said. We're going to do this together. Another alert flashed. More ships were appearing on sensors. Dozens. But these weren't Earth ships. They were long, black, and silent. Moving fast. Unannounced. They had arrived. Velnari warships. The invasion had begun. Earth Command, this is Wells. They're here. I need control of your global satellite array. Request denied. Ethan slammed his fist on the console. They will block your defenses before you even see them. Let me in. Let me show you what Ale gave me. No answer. Then, a soft chime. The orb began projecting beams of light across the ship's walls. Maps, schematics, frequencies. It was auto-connecting with Earth's military networks. It was bypassing every firewall on its own. Within seconds, Earth's main defense grid lit up. Then came the voice again. This is General Locke. Orbital defense now under your command, Ethan. Ethan blinked. What? You've got the only map that can see them. Show us where to shoot. For the next 10 minutes, Ethan wasn't just a passenger. He became the commander of Earth's first real resistance. He pointed out the ships hidden behind Mars' shadow. He exposed the two that had cloaked near the moon. He warned of the drop pods preparing to descend into the Pacific. And for every warning, Earth responded. Missiles launched. Satellites shifted. Lasers fired from orbital platforms. For the first time in their history, the Velnari were stopped before they even touched ground. But then came the final ship. Massive. More like a floating city than a vessel. It moved slowly, like it didn't care about the fight. It carried thousands. It was the one meant to enslave Earth's leadership, its people, its knowledge. Ethan looked at the orb. It pulsed red. That's the mothership, Al said over the comms. It won't fall to Earth weapons. Only one thing can reach its core. The orb. What do you mean? It was designed by the Velnari, but never for war. It's a key. You're the only one who can activate it. You have to board that ship. Ethan stared at Earth below. I can't just leave now. You're not leaving, Al said. You're going to finish what we started. Ethan nodded slowly. Where are you? A ship appeared beside him, a small vessel with curved wings and a smooth white hull. I'm here, Al said. Come aboard. Ethan grabbed the orb and stepped into the transport tube that extended toward Al's ship. When the door closed behind him, the two of them finally stood face to face again. Al's body was wrapped in armor now, part metal, part light, but his eyes were still the same. Calm, steady, honest. Ready? He asked. Ethan nodded. They launched toward the mothership. Inside, the corridors were wide and silent. No guards, no resistance. The ship thought it was invincible. They reached the core, an ancient machine spinning with energy. Ethan approached it. The orb in his hands began to glow, brighter and brighter, until it floated on its own and entered the core's chamber. Light exploded. The ship shuddered. Every Velnari inside froze. The command system went offline. The ship's engines stopped. The invasion was over. Later, when Earth confirmed the last enemy ship had powered down, when the skies were finally clear, Ethan stood again on solid ground. Crowds gathered. Leaders watched. But he didn't speak. He simply placed the orb in a glass chamber, sealed, safe, and unpowered. El stood beside him. "You could have destroyed them all," El said. "Why didn't you?" "Because they need to remember what we did," Ethan said. "Not what we destroyed, but what we saved." El looked at him. "So what now?" Ethan smiled, finally free. "Now, I go home."